Have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, desperately needing to make a decision, and found yourself looking up at the sky, pleading for a sign that never seems to come? Perhaps you've whispered prayers into the darkness, asking God to just tell you what to do, which path to take, which door to walk through, only to be met with what feels like deafening silence. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. And what I'm about to share with you might completely transform how you experience divine guidance in your everyday life. Here's the truth that most of us have never been told. We've been taught to seek God's voice in all the wrong places. From childhood, we've been conditioned to believe that divine guidance comes from somewhere out there, from the heavens above, from sacred texts, from spiritual leaders, or through elaborate rituals and ceremonies. We've learned to treat God's wisdom as something external, something distant, something we must reach for with all our might. Has this ever happened to you? You face a critical decision about your career, your relationships, your finances, or your health, and you find yourself feeling spiritually paralyzed, unable to move forward because you're waiting for some external confirmation that just doesn't arrive. The tragedy isn't that God isn't speaking, it's that we've forgotten how to listen to the voice that's been speaking within us all along. Think about the last major decision you struggled with. Maybe it was whether to leave a job that was draining your soul, or whether to invest in an opportunity that seemed risky, or how to navigate a relationship that had become complicated. In those moments of crisis, when you cried out for guidance, did you feel abandoned? Did you wonder if perhaps you weren't worthy enough, spiritual enough, or good enough for God to answer? The weight of that silence can be crushing, leaving us feeling isolated in our most vulnerable moments. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What if I told you that every unanswered prayer, every moment of confusion, every decision where you felt utterly alone, all of it stems from a single, profound misunderstanding about where divine guidance actually resides? The voice you've been seeking in the clouds, in church buildings, in the words of others, has been whispering within your own consciousness this entire time, closer to you than your own heartbeat, more intimate than your own thoughts. Stay with me until the end of this teaching, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally shift how you approach not just the big, life-altering decisions, but every single choice you make throughout your day. The 5 daily alignments we're going to explore together aren't about adding more spiritual practices to an already overwhelming schedule. They're about remembering something you've always known but somehow forgot. That the kingdom of heaven, that place where perfect wisdom and divine clarity exist, isn't somewhere you need to travel to reach. It's already inside you, right now, in this very moment. This is the revolutionary truth that changes absolutely everything about how you make decisions, and it's simpler than you've ever imagined. We've been approaching divine guidance as if it's some mystical skill that requires decades of meditation practice or special spiritual gifts that only a chosen few possess. But here's what's actually happening. The wisdom you need for every decision, from the mundane to the life-altering, is already flowing through your consciousness like a river that never stops moving. The only question is whether you've learned to recognize it, to feel its current, to trust its direction. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and instead of immediately reaching for your phone to scroll through the anxiety-inducing noise of the world, you pause for just a moment and sense that quiet presence within you. Not something you have to conjure up through effort or strain, but something that's simply there, waiting to be acknowledged. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding at work. You approach it with a clarity that surprises even you. The financial decision that's been keeping you awake at night. Suddenly, the right path becomes obvious, not through logical analysis alone, but through an inner knowing that transcends mere calculation. The relationship tension that normally triggers your deepest insecurities? You respond from a place of groundedness that feels both foreign and familiar at the same time. I create these videos for seekers ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation. If this resonated with you, subscribe and join this community learning to hear God's voice in everyday decisions. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. It's what becomes possible when you shift from seeking guidance externally to recognizing the divine voice that speaks through your own awareness. The transformation in how you experience decision-making doesn't require you to become someone different or to achieve some elevated spiritual status. It happens through what I call the 5 daily alignments, simple adjustments in perception that reconnect you with the wisdom that's been broadcasting within you all along. These aren't complicated rituals or time-consuming practices that demand an extra hour carved out of your already overwhelming schedule. They're micro shifts in awareness, moments of recognition that can happen while you're sitting in traffic, standing in line at the grocery store, or lying in bed before sleep. Now, I want to go even deeper into what makes this approach so radically different from everything else. You've tried. The hidden truth behind truly aligned decision-making isn't found in gathering more information, consulting more experts, or waiting for perfect external conditions. It emerges when your consciousness learns to distinguish between the anxious chatter of fear-based thinking and the quiet, steady voice of divine wisdom that never shouts but always speaks with unmistakable clarity. Behind the scenes of every decision you've ever made that felt genuinely right, that brought unexpected peace even when it didn't make logical sense, was this inner voice guiding you. You just may not have recognized it consciously at the time. If you're beginning to sense that there might be another way to navigate your choices, one that doesn't leave you exhausted from overthinking or paralyzed by fear of making the wrong move, write in the comments, "I'm ready to hear clearly." The first alignment might surprise you because it goes against everything our achievement-oriented culture has taught us about spiritual growth. We've been conditioned to believe that hearing God's voice requires tremendous effort, longer prayers, more intense devotion, stricter discipline, deeper sacrifice. We exhaust ourselves trying to become worthy enough, spiritual enough, pure enough to finally deserve divine guidance. But here's the hidden truth that transforms everything. The strain itself is the problem. The harder you try to grasp divine wisdom through effort alone, the more you create internal noise that drowns out the very voice you're seeking. Think about it like this. When you're desperately trying to remember someone's name and it sits just out of reach in your memory, what happens? The more you strain and force it, the more elusive it becomes. But the moment you relax and stop pushing, suddenly the name surfaces effortlessly. Divine guidance works exactly the same way. The I am consciousness within you isn't playing hide and seek, testing whether you can pray hard enough or meditate long enough to finally break through. It's been broadcasting continuously like a radio station that never goes off the air, transmitting on a frequency that becomes crystal clear the moment you stop straining and simply recognize what's already present. This shift from effort to awareness changes the entire journey. Instead of approaching each decision from a place of spiritual anxiety, wondering if you've done enough to deserve clarity, you begin from a foundation of trust that the guidance is already there, already speaking, already flowing through your consciousness. The transformation in how you make decisions becomes tangible when you understand that you're not trying to create something new. You're removing the barriers to what has always been true. Your mornings hold a power that most people completely overlook. Those first few seconds after you wake up, before your mind floods with the day's demands, before anxiety about pending decisions creeps in, before you reach for your phone and immerse yourself in everyone else's reality. That's sacred ground. In those moments, your consciousness is still quiet enough to establish the foundational frequency for everything that follows. This isn't about adding another obligation to your morning routine or setting your alarm earlier to squeeze in a complicated practice. It's about a simple recognition that takes less time than checking your first text message. Before your feet touch the floor tomorrow morning, pause for just one breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The kingdom of heaven is within me right now, and divine guidance is my natural state of being. These aren't magical incantations or empty affirmations. They're recognition statements that align your awareness with reality. What makes this practice so powerful isn't the words themselves. It's the shift in consciousness they represent. You're establishing a mindset that becomes the lens through which you experience every interaction, every challenge, every choice that unfolds throughout your day. That meeting where you need to make a difficult decision, you enter it already anchored in divine wisdom. The conversation that usually triggers your reactive patterns, you approach it from a completely different foundation. Now, I want to reveal what happens when you practice this recognition consistently and why the journey of transformation unfolds in ways you might not expect. The impact of beginning your day with this awareness creates ripples that extend far beyond those initial moments, fundamentally reshaping how you navigate the countless micro-decisions and major crossroads that define your life. If this understanding of recognition over straining resonates with something in you, write in the comments, "I choose awareness." Here's what most people get wrong about spiritual practice, and it's costing them the very transformation they're seeking. We live in a culture obsessed with intensity, with dramatic breakthroughs, and life-changing peak experiences. You've probably approached spiritual growth the same way, waiting until you hit a crisis, then throwing yourself into hours of desperate prayer, hoping that sheer intensity will finally crack open the heavens and deliver the guidance you need. But behind the scenes of every genuine transformation I've witnessed, there's a pattern that contradicts everything we've been taught about breakthrough moments. 5 minutes of gentle, daily recognition will reshape how you hear divine guidance far more profoundly than occasional marathon sessions fueled by panic and fear. Your consciousness doesn't respond to dramatic overhauls the way our achievement culture suggests. Instead, it's like tending a garden. You don't ignore the plants for weeks and then dump gallons of water on them in a single desperate attempt at revival. That approach creates damage, not growth. You provide small amounts of consistent nourishment, and the garden naturally flourishes. Your ability to discern God's voice in your decisions works exactly the same way. Each time you pause to recognize the presence within, you're making subtle adjustments to your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning yourself to divine frequency with increasing precision. The beauty of this approach reveals itself in how it transforms your actual daily experience, not just your theoretical understanding. Throughout any given day, you encounter dozens of decision points that either reinforce your old reactive patterns or create new pathways for divine wisdom to flow through. Your boss delivers criticism that normally would trigger immediate defensiveness. Traffic makes you late for an important meeting, and panic starts flooding your system. An unexpected bill arrives in your inbox, and financial anxiety grips your chest. These moments happen so quickly that you barely register the split second where you have a choice about how to respond. This is precisely where sacred pauses reveal their extraordinary power. You have approximately 3 seconds before your conditioned responses take over completely. 3 seconds where you can insert awareness into situations that previously triggered automatic reactions. Even 30 seconds of returning to that inner kingdom creates space for divine clarity to emerge beyond the surface appearances of whatever challenge you're facing. You're not denying the reality of the situation or pretending difficulties don't exist. You're accessing a deeper dimension of wisdom that provides guidance your anxious, reactive mind simply cannot access when it's dominated by fear. What makes this practice so transformative is how gradually it rewires your entire approach to decision-making. At first, you might only remember to pause after you've already reacted, recognizing in hindsight that another option was available. That's perfectly fine. That's progress. Then you begin catching yourself mid-reaction, inserting awareness into moments that used to unfold completely unconsciously. Eventually, and this is where the journey becomes truly remarkable, the pause starts feeling natural, almost instinctive, as your default setting shifts from reactive fear to receptive awareness. Now, I want to explore how this foundation of consistent practice and sacred pauses specifically transforms the two areas of life where we most desperately need divine guidance, where fear most easily drowns out that inner voice, and where the decisions we make carry the heaviest consequences for our well-being and peace. If you're starting to see how these small, consistent practices could change your relationship with decision-making, write in the comments, "Small shifts, big transformation." The second alignment reveals itself most powerfully in those moments when your body sends signals that trigger immediate fear. You notice an unusual symptom, a persistent pain, something that feels off, and within seconds, your mind spirals into worst-case scenarios. Your entire focus narrows exclusively to material solutions, researching symptoms online, scheduling appointments, analyzing every physical sensation with increasing anxiety. In this state of panic, something profound happens that you might not even notice. Your spiritual awareness completely shuts down. The connection to inner guidance that was available just moments before becomes inaccessible, drowned out by the noise of fear. If these insights speak to where you are on your journey, subscribe to continue exploring together. Each video translates spiritual wisdom into practical steps you can actually implement in your daily life. But here's the transformation that changes everything about health-related decisions. Before allowing panic to hijack your consciousness, you can pause and turn within to recognize a deeper truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there exists only wholeness and divine perfection. This isn't about denying physical reality or rejecting medical wisdom. It's about creating sacred space where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being, guiding you toward appropriate action from a foundation of peace rather than terror. The decisions you make about your health from this consciousness are fundamentally different than those made from panic. You're still seeking proper care, still taking necessary action, but you're doing so guided by clarity rather than driven by fear. The hidden truth behind healing that most people never discover is that wholeness exists first as a spiritual reality. And when your consciousness aligns with that truth, it creates pathways for well-being that remain completely blocked when fear dominates your awareness. This doesn't guarantee specific outcomes or replace medical treatment, but it transforms the quality of guidance you receive and the peace you experience throughout the journey, regardless of what unfolds. Now, this same principle revolutionizes the other area of life, where fear most easily silences divine guidance, your relationship with money and provision. Financial concerns trigger something primal in us, activating survival instincts that create such intense static that hearing God's voice becomes virtually impossible. You check your bank balance and feel your chest tighten. An unexpected expense arrives and panic floods your entire system. Income decreases and suddenly you're making desperate decisions from a place of scarcity and urgency that overrides any access to spiritual wisdom. The third alignment happens when you shift from scarcity consciousness to recognizing abundance from the kingdom perspective. Divine substance is infinite and omnipresent, and here's what's revolutionary about this understanding. Your actual experience of provision is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not just external economic conditions. This doesn't mean positive thinking magically creates money or that you ignore practical financial planning. It means that when you bring kingdom awareness to money decisions, you access divine intelligence that sees possibilities your anxious, scarcity-focused mind simply cannot perceive. Opportunities appear that weren't visible through the lens of fear. Creative solutions emerge that your panic-driven thinking never considered. The guidance you receive about earning, spending, and managing resources comes from a place of wisdom that transcends material circumstances. What makes this so powerful in practice is that provision actually follows presence. When unexpected expenses arrive or your income suddenly shifts, instead of immediately spiraling into worst-case scenarios and making reactive decisions, you return first to the awareness that God's voice is speaking guidance even in this exact circumstance. Every financial decision becomes an opportunity to hear divine wisdom rather than another trigger for anxiety that keeps you awake at night, disconnected from the very source of clarity you need. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance provided unexpected solutions to health or financial challenges, write in the comments. Guidance transcends circumstances. The transformation in your financial life becomes tangible when you understand that provision truly follows presence. Picture yourself sitting at your kitchen table, bills spread out in front of you, and the numbers simply don't add up. Your old conditioned response would spiral immediately into panic mode, catastrophizing, desperately strategizing, losing sleep over scenarios that haven't even happened. But when you've cultivated kingdom consciousness through these daily alignments, something fundamentally different occurs. You pause and recognize that divine intelligence sees possibilities that your anxious mind cannot access. You bring transformed awareness to the practical work of addressing the situation, allowing spiritual wisdom to inform material decisions rather than letting material panic completely override your connection to guidance. What surprises most people about this shift is that it doesn't necessarily mean money magically appears or problems vanish without effort. The journey unfolds differently. Unexpected opportunities emerge that weren't visible through the lens of scarcity. Creative solutions surface that your fear-driven thinking never considered. A conversation happens that opens doors you didn't know existed. Behind the scenes of what others might call financial breakthrough is simply consciousness aligned with divine abundance, expressing itself through practical circumstances in ways that logic alone could never predict or manufacture. Now, this same principle of listening for God's voice transforms perhaps the most complex and emotionally charged area of human experience, your relationships. Think about your most challenging relationship right now. Maybe it's your spouse who seems to trigger every insecurity you have. Perhaps it's a parent whose approval you've been seeking your entire life, or a colleague whose behavior constantly sparks frustration and resentment. Your conditioned response focuses exclusively on what's wrong with them, how they need to change, why they're making your life difficult, what you wish they would finally understand. But here's the hidden truth that revolutionizes relational dynamics. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people or waiting for others to finally become who you want them to be. It's developing perfect listening to God's voice through every single interaction, even and especially the difficult ones. The fourth alignment happens when you shift from trying to control or fix relationships to receiving divine wisdom about how to navigate them. When you approach relationships from kingdom consciousness, you access guidance about how to respond rather than react, what to say in moments of tension, when to speak truth, and when silence serves better, how to set boundaries from love rather than from fear or manipulation. This doesn't make relationship challenges magically disappear or turn difficult people into easy ones. Conflicts still arise, disappointments still occur, people still say hurtful things. But you're navigating these experiences from an entirely different foundation, one that allows revelations about yourself and others that remain completely hidden when you're operating purely from reactive patterns and emotional triggers. The decisions you make in relationships, whether to stay or leave, how to address issues, when to offer grace, and when to maintain boundaries, come from deeper guidance rather than conditioned patterns of defense, attack, or withdrawal. The impact of this shift extends far beyond individual relationships to transform how you experience human connection itself. If you're beginning to see how kingdom consciousness could transform even your most difficult relationships, write in the comments, Divine wisdom guides my connections. The fifth alignment addresses an area where most of us spend the majority of our waking hours, yet rarely consider it spiritual territory at all. For most people, their professional environment represents a complete spiritual dead zone, where divine presence seems distant, irrelevant, or entirely disconnected from the practical demands of getting work done. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, performance expectations, and competition creates such a dense frequency of stress that any awareness of God's voice gets completely drowned out. You might pray before leaving for work, but the moment you step into that office or log into that computer, it's as if you've entered a realm where spiritual guidance simply doesn't apply. But here's the transformation that revolutionizes how you experience those 40, 50, 60 hours each week. The fifth alignment happens when you reframe work from mere employment, from something you endure to pay bills, into spiritual expression itself. That project deadline that usually triggers anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging through you in perfect timing. That difficult colleague who normally sparks immediate frustration becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and them, accessing wisdom about how to navigate the dynamic rather than just react to their behavior. This shift doesn't require changing careers or finding spiritually oriented employment. It happens through bringing presence to whatever work you're already doing, recognizing that divine creativity can express itself through spreadsheets and sales calls just as readily as through traditionally spiritual activities. The impact extends far beyond productivity metrics to transform the actual quality of your daily experience. You begin noticing solutions flowing naturally when your consciousness isn't constricted by stress and fear. You find yourself handling workplace challenges with clarity that surprises even you. Behind the scenes of truly innovative work is often this exact dynamic: unlimited intelligence flowing through consciousness that's open enough to receive it, rather than closed down by anxiety about performance and survival. Now, as kingdom consciousness matures through your consistent practice of these 5 alignments, something precious emerges that goes beyond any specific benefit in health, finances, relationships, or career. You awaken to an authentic peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect, on everything going your way, or on finally having all your problems solved. This isn't the artificial calm that comes from temporarily having everything under control. It's a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends whatever situation you're facing. Financial setbacks still require practical action and wise decision-making, but you navigate them without the paralysis of fear that used to shut down your ability to think clearly. Relationship difficulties still need to be addressed, conversations still need to happen, boundaries still need setting, but you approach them without the emotional reactivity that used to make everything more complicated and painful. The hidden truth here is profound and often missed. When you position yourself to hear God's voice clearly through these daily alignments, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, though that certainly flows more readily. What emerges is something deeper, an unshakable foundation that remains steady regardless of external conditions. This peace becomes the ground from which all your decisions arise, the lens through which you perceive challenges, the anchor that holds you steady when life's storms inevitably arrive. If you're sensing how this foundation of peace could transform not just your decisions, but your entire experience of life itself, write in the comments, "Peace guides my path." Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this journey actually demands, because the pathway to hearing God's voice in every decision requires something that challenges everything our instant gratification culture has conditioned us to expect. Consistent commitment regardless of immediate results. This isn't a weekend workshop that produces instant enlightenment or a 21-day challenge that permanently transforms your awareness. The transformation unfolds through those small, repeated recognitions we've been exploring, gradually reshaping your consciousness through accumulated practice rather than through a single dramatic breakthrough. Here's the reality that most spiritual teachers won't tell you directly, but you deserve to hear. Some people begin these 5 daily alignments and experience remarkable shifts within weeks, suddenly finding clarity in decisions that used to paralyze them, sensing divine guidance with a certainty they've never felt before. Others practice diligently for months before significant changes become visible in their experience. A few grow impatient when miracles don't materialize on their preferred timeline and abandon the practice altogether, never discovering what was just beginning to emerge beneath the surface. The decisive factor between these different experiences isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism. It's simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing the presence within, even when immediate evidence doesn't scream validation. Each time, you pause to acknowledge the kingdom within. Each morning, you begin with that simple recognition, each sacred pause during challenging moments. You're creating subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that fundamentally reshapes your experience, almost always unfolds through accumulated small decisions rather than singular dramatic moments. Your consciousness works exactly the same way, gradually tuning itself to divine frequency with increasing precision through consistent practice. But here's perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire teaching, something that removes every excuse and eliminates every barrier between where you are right now and the guidance you're seeking. You can begin this very moment, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology first. You don't need years of meditation experience or advanced spiritual credentials. You don't need to become someone different or achieve some elevated status before you're qualified to hear God's voice. The kingdom of heaven exists within you right now, at this very moment, exactly as you are. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge through whatever decision you're facing. Your ability to hear divine guidance isn't something you need to build through years of arduous effort. It's something you simply recognize as already complete within your consciousness. The recognition doesn't create the connection. It reveals what has always been present, always been speaking, always been available to you. This means that the profound shift in how you make decisions can literally begin with your very next breath, with the very next choice point you encounter today. If you're ready to begin this journey right now, exactly where you are, without waiting for perfect conditions, or more spiritual preparation, write in the comments, "I start today." If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're exactly the kind of person this message was meant to reach. There's something in you that's already awakening to these truths, already recognizing the divine presence that's been speaking within you all along. That recognition brought you here, and it's going to continue guiding you forward in ways you can't even imagine yet. I create these videos for people like you, seekers who are ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation, into actually hearing God's voice in the practical, everyday decisions that shape your life. If this teaching resonated with something deep inside you, if even one insight shifted your awareness, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people who are learning to live from kingdom consciousness. Each video we explore together translates profound spiritual truths into steps you can actually implement today, not someday when you're more ready or more spiritual. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, if you sense that you were meant to hear this today, write in the comments, "This message was meant for me." Your story, your journey, your recognition might be exactly what another person needs to hear to begin their own awakening. There's real power in acknowledging these truths, even if it's just through a few typed words. And if you found value in what we explored together today, if this conversation created even a small shift in how you understand divine guidance, consider tapping that like button. Not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered, that these truths still have power to transform lives in our distracted, anxious world. There's a video right here about maintaining this connection to divine guidance, even when life gets overwhelming, when circumstances seem to contradict everything we've discussed today. It's a natural continuation of this journey, showing you how to sustain this awareness through the challenges that inevitably arise. Click and continue with me over there as we go deeper into living from this consciousness. Until we meet again, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, and God's voice is already speaking. You're simply learning to recognize what has always been true.